In reality, there isn't a scientific explanation for everything. There likely never will be. Some things are just beyond our understanding, and that includes the remains from the ancient world, not just the mysteries of today or whatever's coming next. So join us for today's video, as we're going to take a look at 5 of the most mysteriously out-of-place ancient people in history. The Pale Visitors. In the spring of 1519, unfamiliar sails broke the horizon off the coast of Mexico, rising from the sea like gods from ancient myth. They carried pale-skinned men clad in armor, mounted on beasts the Aztecs had never encountered. Among them was a bearded figure named Hernán Cortés, whose arrival would dismantle an empire. But had Europeans already set foot on these lands long before Cortés? For the Aztecs, this moment echoed ancient prophecy. According to legend, the god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, had once departed east across the ocean, promising to return. He was a deity of knowledge, creation, and the endless cycle of rebirth and ruin. As the Spaniards advanced inland, word of their presence spread. Emperor Montezuma received disturbing reports of weapons that roared and ships that towered. Caught between awe and dread, he met Cortés in the magnificent city of Tenochtitlan. Some believe Montezuma did the unthinkable. He received Cortés as a god. One account quotes him saying, "You have graciously come on earth, I who used to keep your throne for you." The Aztec Empire, with all its wealth and strength, was surrendered without resistance. Within 2 years, it collapsed. This encounter is often linked to the so-called white god theory, the idea that indigenous peoples mistook Europeans for returning deities. But who knows the truth? Many scholars argue that Montezuma's words were strategic, not sacred, twisted by Spanish chroniclers to glorify European dominance. Others suggest Quetzalcoatl himself may have originated from the Old World. Accounts from the conquest mention strange artifacts and symbols, including cross-like imagery in Mayan glyphs. Chronicler Bernal Díaz del Castillo viewed these as evidence of pre-Columbian contact. Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas described Quetzalcoatl as tall, fair-skinned, and bearded, traits rarely native to Mesoamerica. Fringe theories persist that 17th-century historian Carlos de Sigüenza y Góngora proposed that Quetzalcoatl was actually Thomas the Apostle. Others point to medieval seafarers, such as Irish monk Saint Brendan, or even the Knights Templar, who, according to unconfirmed stories, may have crossed the Atlantic after 1307. Whether Quetzalcoatl was an indigenous god, an ancient voyager, or a colonial invention, the tale remains a powerful emblem of cultural collision. Cortés, whether venerated or merely opportunistic, reshaped history forever. What started as prophecy ended in violence, as a mighty and mysterious civilization crumbled beneath the myth of a returning god. Ancient contact. It began with a few curious discoveries, artifacts found in places they had no logical reason to be. Taken separately, each find could be dismissed as a coincidence, but together, they suggest something far more remarkable. A voyage across the Pacific, centuries before Columbus ever reached the Americas. Around 1150 AD, a group of Polynesian navigators may have ventured beyond the frontiers of their known world, guided only by starlight, ocean currents, and the subtle flight paths of migrating birds. The notion of pre-Columbian contact between Polynesia and South America was long met with skepticism. Yet the Polynesians, master sailors of the vast Pacific, left behind evidence of a journey few thought possible. Among the most amazing is a humble crop, the sweet potato. Native to South America, the plant somehow traveled across thousands of miles of open sea and was cultivated in Polynesia long before European explorers arrived. The Polynesian name for the crop, kumara, is strikingly close to the Quechua word kumar, used in Peru, suggesting more than coincidence. Other items deepen the mystery. Obsidian tools unearthed in South America exhibit craftsmanship identical to Polynesian techniques. Meanwhile, chicken bones, linked genetically to ancient Polynesian stock, have been found in Chilean coastal dig sites, despite chickens not being native to South America. For years, scholars scoffed at the idea that Polynesians could have completed such a journey. The distance, they argued, was insurmountable. The Pacific, too expansive. But recent studies have proved otherwise. Polynesian double-hulled canoes, built for endurance and balance, were capable of navigating thousands of miles. Their seafarers relied on a complex knowledge system, tracking wave refraction, subtle wind patterns, and even the drift of cloud formations. Then came the most decisive clue: DNA. Genetic research on indigenous South American groups revealed Polynesian ancestry, and in turn, Polynesian genomes carried unmistakable markers of Native American lineage. These two worlds, long assumed to be separate, clearly met and exchanged more than trade goods. The belief that ancient civilizations lived in isolation, untouched until European arrival, is slowly unraveling. And if a few daring sailors managed to cross one of Earth's greatest oceans a millennium ago, what else might have happened that history has quietly forgotten? Well, as we've said a lot of times, our history is completely unreal. Warriors in a strange land. The streets of Constantinople gleamed with marble and gold, an opulent city unlike anything the warriors from the north had ever laid eyes on. Towering above the crowds stood the emperor's guard, men clad in heavy chainmail, their long axes resting across their broad shoulders. These were the Varangian Guard, an elite unit sworn to protect the Byzantine emperor at all costs. Yet among their ranks were not native Greeks or Romans, but fair-haired warriors from distant lands far beyond the empire's reach. The Varangian Guard's roots trace back to a pivotal alliance forged in blood and political strategy. In 988 CE, Prince Vladimir of Kievan Rus, aiming to legitimize his rule and forge a powerful alliance, sent 6,000 Norse mercenaries to Emperor Basil II in return for a dynastic marriage with the imperial family. Basil, who was mired in civil war and surrounded by treacherous generals, needed loyal soldiers, and these battle-hardened Scandinavians proved themselves almost immediately. They helped Basil crush the rebellion and secure his throne. The word Varangian comes from the Old Norse Varingi, meaning a sworn companion or mercenary under oath. Initially used to describe Norse traders and raiders who journeyed eastward, it eventually became synonymous with the emperor's most trusted guards in Byzantium. To these northern warriors, Constantinople, known to them as Miklagard or the Great City, was a place of immense wealth and opportunity, a city where fame and fortune awaited those bold enough to take it. Unlike their relatives who raided the shores of Western Europe, the Varangians in Constantinople embraced a different kind of warfare. Their discipline, shaped by years of sea voyages and brutal combat, made them ideal royal bodyguards. Their loyalty was super-renowned, at least so long as their contract endured. Over time, the Guard's ranks expanded, drawing in warriors from across Europe, Anglo-Saxons, Germans, and Slavs among them. But it was the Scandinavians who defined the unit's legacy. Their weapon of choice was the long-handled axe, a devastating instrument capable of cleaving through shields and armor with terrifying force. On the battlefield, the Varangians were the emperor's final shield, unleashed only in the most dire of circumstances. Their tactics blended Norse aggression with Byzantine discipline, creating a fearsome and unpredictable force. They fought across the empire, from Anatolia's hills to the battlefields of southern Italy. Some eventually returned home, their deeds etched into sagas and carved onto runestones, while others remained, drawn forever by the wealth and wonder of Constantinople. The Mystery of Scott's Grave. In the hills of Ireland's County Kerry, A solitary rock formation rises from the grassy terrain, known for centuries as Scott's Grave. It's long been tied to the legend of Scota, an Egyptian princess who, according to medieval Irish and Scottish records, sailed across the seas to Ireland and became the ancestral mother of the Gaels. Though historians often dismiss the tale as myth, it endures, supported by puzzling relics, misplaced animal remains, archaic manuscripts, and a burial site with murky origins. Scota's name first appears in medieval texts, with the earliest surviving references dating back to the 12th century. In sources like the Book of the Taking of Ireland, Scota is described as the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh, sometimes referred to as Chinggis. She is said to have married Nell, a scholar of languages who had traveled from Babylon to Egypt. Their son, Goidel Glas, is credited with creating the Gaelic language by blending parts of the 72 tongues spoken after the collapse of the Tower of Babel. Another variation of the legend presents Scota as the wife of Mil Espine, who was a warrior and king from ancient Iberia. His descendants, the Milesians, would eventually conquer Ireland. This version ties her name directly to Scoti, the Latin term used for the early inhabitants of Ireland and Scotland. While modern scholars regard these stories as romanticized medieval inventions crafted to grant the Gaels a royal origin, a number of strange details have kept the legend alive. Archaeological findings have uncovered North African artifacts in Ireland, including the skull of a Barbary ape, an animal native to Egypt, found buried at an ancient site. More recently, genetic analysis of a 5,200-year-old female skeleton discovered near Belfast revealed DNA links to the Middle East, suggesting that contact between these far regions may have occurred long before written history began. Despite these intriguing clues, Scott's Grave itself offers little definitive evidence. A close inspection carried out in 1999 concluded that the site lacked the necessary proof to be formally classified as an archaeological monument. But as we know, archaeologists are still making new discoveries, and it is possible that future explorations may reveal more about the connections between ancient Egypt and other old civilizations. The Englishman who became a samurai. In April of 1600, a battered ship limped into the coastal waters off Kyushu, Japan. Torn apart by storms and time, it was the last survivor of a 5-vessel Dutch fleet. The other ships had vanished. This one, its mast shattered and hull nearly broken in two, was all that remained. After 2 brutal years at sea, the original crew of 110 had been reduced to just 24 men, most of them too weak to walk. Among them was an English navigator named William Adams, unaware that his arrival would quietly reshape the course of Japanese history. Adams had left Europe in 1598, sailing under the Dutch East India Company in search of wealth among the Spice Islands. But the expedition was plagued with disaster. Competing fleets, vicious storms, and infighting fractured the mission, turning it from a trade journey into a desperate struggle for survival. By the time their ship, named De Liefde, drifted into Japanese waters, it was more wreck than vessel. Upon arrival, the survivors were promptly detained and brought before Tokugawa Ieyasu, the rising military ruler of Japan, on the verge of consolidating power and declaring himself shogun. Foreign traders had made contact with Japan before, primarily Portuguese and Spanish, many of whom came as missionaries spreading Catholicism. But Adams was different. He was a Protestant, uninterested in conversion, and carried no religious agenda. Instead, he brought something Japan found far more valuable: expertise in ship construction, astronomy, navigation, and European military technology. Ieyasu, keen to expand Japan's naval capabilities and counterbalance the growing influence of Portuguese Catholics, spared Adams and kept him close. Rather than executing him, as was common for trespassing foreigners, he appointed him a technical advisor. Over the following years, Adams supervised the construction of Japan's first Western-style ships, allowing the nation to build its own fleet capable of distant maritime travel. He shared advanced navigational methods, improved coastal defenses, and became a trusted presence within Ieyasu's court. In 1603, when Tokugawa Ieyasu formally took the title of shogun, Adams was granted something unprecedented for a foreigner, the status of Hatamoto, a direct retainer of the shogun himself. With that honor came land, status, an estate with 80 servants, and a new Japanese name, Miura Anjin, the pilot of Miura, named after the region where he had been granted his fief. But Adams's rise came with a cost. Declared legally bound to Japan, he was forbidden to leave the country. Though he eventually married a Japanese woman and fathered children, he was never allowed to return to England. He had become a man suspended between two worlds, rooted in neither, loyal to both. In 1613, when an English trading ship called the Clove arrived seeking to establish official ties with Japan, Adams did not board it and sail home. Instead, he stayed and negotiated for them. He was fluent in Japanese and trusted by the shogunate, and he secured England's first formal trade agreement with Japan, establishing the beginnings of Anglo-Japanese relations. Adams died in 1620, far from the country of his birth, buried in the land he had come to serve. The coastal town of Anjinzuka, where his grave lies, still bears his adopted name. His transformation, from orphaned shipwright in England to honored samurai in Japan, has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and films. Most famously, he served as the real-life model for the character of John Blackthorne in James Clavell's historical novel Shogun. Adams's story is one of survival, transformation, and adaptation. He did not arrive in Japan as a conqueror or diplomat, but as a shipwrecked sailor. And yet, through skill and trust earned, he became something entirely unexpected. A foreigner welcomed not just into Japan, but into the inner circle of its most powerful ruler. And it's pretty big. Now let's talk about the Nazca Lines. Everyone who's ever flown over Peru's Nazca Desert has had the same reaction. What is that? Stretching across 200 miles southeast of Lima lies a huge network of 800 bright razor-straight lines etched into the earth, some extending for miles. Alongside them are enormous figures, monkeys, hummingbirds, spiders, and geometric patterns so precise they look machine-made. The largest stretches nearly 1,200 feet. Here's the weird part. These lines are only fully visible from the sky, so naturally, the ancient alien crowd has a field day, arguing that humans without aircraft couldn't have possibly pulled this off. And sure, modern archaeologists have figured out how the Nazca people could have done it, with string, surveying techniques, and a whole lot of patience. But no one knows why they did it. Was it ritual? Astronomy? Something we've missed entirely? Well, let us know, and we hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. We'll see you